It makes me really sad that that these sort of things are focusing about excluding people rather than bringing them together.
Your thoughts, Andrew? I mean, the examples in the explanatory memorandum are quite something. For example, here's another one. An office worker could declare on social media that a fellow employee is in a wheelchair because they are sinful and urge them to attend a faith healer. Yeah. And the workplace inclusion policy would be overridden by such a statement of belief.
Exactly what Leonie said. While I was reading that, I was saying things, reading that I could not say on national radio, because it's just whatever happened to do unto others and all these core things. There's no asterisks at the end of do unto others. Everyone is equal. You treat everyone nicely. You treat everyone fairly. You treat everyone equally. Period.
Okay. All right. Well, before we go, there was a very interesting editorial in the New Zealand Herald that I thought I might raise with you both. It was a few days ago, but it is Christmas time, and it says that we know the spirit of Christmas is not found in a bottle or a box tied with a bow. Yet again, we find ourselves swept along by the headlong rush to overextend ourselves, to overeat, overdrink, overspend. Plan to spend not so much money, but time with nature. We are all blessed with access, even if it's a pocket park up the street. Christmas is in feeling wrapped, not in the act of unwrapping. And the article says, by all means give, but give the most precious thing of all, your time, your attention, your care. Give of yourself. Give until it heals and breathe. So, look, it was a remarkably contemplative article for a Herald editorial, but something that really did resonate. Do you both buy the essential message? Leonie, you first.
Absolutely. I mean, I like Christmas, and one of the things that I love Christmas is, for me, it's not so much about lots of presents and food and all that sort of stuff. It's about the family being together, and because I think that opportunity is very special, and I value every Christmas that everyone is there and celebrating. So that's what I like to focus on. We don't do huge, we do meals, but they're not a big overeating feast. It's more just about gathering.
Having time together. Absolutely. And breathing. Andrew Frame, what about you?
Yep, the same. About time with family. Our family's now half the size it was. That the passing of my mother and father. But we now sort of focus on our daughter and the family and things like that. But also it's time of giving and thinking about people. Back to the social media thing, we had NZ Secret Santa on Twitter, and several hundred people took part in that. And you find something special about the person that you are given the details to, and you do something for them that's and it's lovely and it's kind and it's caring and it's the old spirit of Christmas as well. Alive and well.
Needless to say, Leona, though, it can be a stressful time too. A look over the family finances, looking back at a year of hurt, family gatherings where perhaps issues haven't been addressed for years.
Yes, and I'm sure that it's families.
Yes.
That is families. But I suppose I come back to my attitude of gratitude, and you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family, and but it's the only one you've got.
Okay, very good. Lots of response regarding social media. We'll try and get a couple of those in tomorrow. But for now, Leonie Freeman, Chief Executive of the Property Council of New Zealand, and Napier-based columnist Andrew Frame. Thank you very much for being with us on the panel today.
Thank you.
Thanks to Ali Ventura for putting the show together. I'm Wallace Chapman. See you tomorrow. Checkpoint is next.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, Sir Ron Braley is facing child porn charges after a police investigation sparked by an anonymous tip-off. A sediment wave caused by heavy rain after Whakaari erupted likely washed the bodies of two missing victims away. And a burns victim talks about her 5-decade road to recovery and acceptance. A soldier has been arrested at Linton military camp. Are they part of a far-right extremist group? After more than 100 years, Tūhoe pacifist Rua Kenana is pardoned. And Goosey Gander with the Shall I Wander? Well, not around Western Springs, that's for sure. We bring you the Great Geese Roundup. Don't forget, you can check us out on Facebook.
RNZ News at 5. No mai haere mai. Good afternoon. I'm Paul Brennan. An investigation into complaints against a former Labour staff member has found allegations of sexual assault and harassment cannot be substantiated. The inquiry by Maria Dew QC found there was insufficient evidence and crucial elements of the complainant's story were incorrect or misleading. It did find claims the staffer was overbearing and aggressive were substantiated, but didn't meet the threshold of unlawful bullying. Labour Party President Claire Szabo says the document's conclusions are straightforward.
The report is clear that the most serious allegations, those of sexual assault, were not established. Overall, Ms Dew's conclusion was that the investigation did not find any misconduct or serious misconduct that would warrant disciplinary action.
Claire Szabo says this saga has taken its toll on everyone involved. The Deputy Police Commissioner Mike Clement says it's possible the two bodies still missing after last Monday's eruption will never wash up on land. The search for 40-year-old local guide Marshall Inman and 17-year-old Australian tourist Winona Langford is being scaled back. Mr Clement says helicopters and Air Force planes will continue sweeps of the area. He says the searches are based on tidal patterns and other information.
There is no guarantee that a body caught in that tidal pattern would end up at landfall. In fact, it could just as easily be carried over the top of the East Cape and out to the Southern Ocean.
Mike Clement says it's normal that a national search operation would be scaled back to a regionally led one. New Zealand-born businessman Rua Braley is facing child pornography charges in Australia after an anonymous tip-off. The New South Wales police have confirmed an 82-year-old man was arrested at Sydney International Airport yesterday, but have yet to name him. Ruth Hill reports.
The ABC reports a police investigation began in August, triggered by a tip-off from a member of the public. The police say a man was stopped at Sydney Airport about 6:30 yesterday morning. His carry-on luggage was searched and a large amount of child porn found on his laptop and electronic storage devices. Australian media have reported Rua Braley was heading to Fiji. He was released on bail to appear in February on 6 counts of child pornography. Rua Braley is the founder of one of New Zealand's biggest investment firms and was knighted in 1988. This is Ruth Hill.
The Health Minister can't say how much the price of medicinal cannabis products could drop as local companies start producing them. Regulations were unveiled today setting out the quality and licensing requirements for manufacturing and distributing medicinal cannabis. David Clark says at the moment, products sourced from overseas can be very expensive. He hopes increased competition from local manufacturers will reduce the cost, but he doesn't know when that might flow through to patients' wallets.
It's impossible to say how the market will change and over what time frame, but what proves to be true in markets around the world is when more suppliers come online, the price tends to drop.
David Clark says the first licences should be issued mid-next year. The grandfather of children who were kept in lockdown while a man was shot by police yesterday in Hastings says it makes no difference that the gun he had was fake. Police have confirmed the 31-year-old presented an imitation pistol before being shot on the grounds of Flaxmere Primary School. He will be charged with Arms Act offences and remains in a stable condition in hospital. Henare O'Keefe, who is also a city councillor, says the police handled the situation appropriately.
There was just no need for it. A fake gun, for goodness sakes. But you have to imagine the worst, don't you? No one was to know, including the police, that it was a fake gun. How on earth do you expect it to know that?
Henare O'Keefe says his grandchildren are doing well following the ordeal, but they will keep an eye on them. The tourism industry is criticising a report by the Commissioner for the Environment for relying on anecdotal evidence to make up for a lack of hard data on the impact of visitors. The Commissioner, Simon Upton, says a projected 4-fold increase in the number of tourists by 2050 could degrade water quality, add to greenhouse gas emissions and change the landscape. The Chief Executive of Tourism Industry Aotearoa, Chris Roberts, says the report recognises there is no systematic way of measuring the impact of tourism.
It's attempted to measure the current environmental impact of tourism, but has recognised we really don't have the data, and it's had to rely on things like a scan of what stories are in the media.
Chris Roberts says the industry is working with the government to find ways of measuring the impact of tourism and tracking it over time. A dolphin calf was found dead and entangled in a fishing net at an Auckland beach over the weekend. The Department of Conservation says it was found at Te Wharanui, north of the city, and had deep cuts in its mouth, dorsal and tail. It says it's likely the dolphin had a horrible death. Senior Ranger Thelma Wilson says it's a reminder that boaties need to dispose of broken fishing lines and rubbish. It's 4 minutes past 5. On to sport now. The Black Caps bowler Trent Boult is confident he'll be fit and ready to play in the Boxing Day cricket test against Australia in Melbourne. The left armour has had a side strain injury and missed New Zealand's big loss in the first test in Perth, having also missed the drawn second test against England in Hamilton.
Feeling pretty good. Probably a little bit frustrated to be on the sidelines and watching the games tick by, but yeah, feel like I've been rehabbing well. Ball's coming out of right, and obviously I'm hoping to be pushing for Boxing Day and to get back out there.
Black Caps bowler Trent Boult. Tall Blacks and Breakers guard Corey Webster will play basketball in China on loan after a buyout offer was accepted by the NBL club, but will rejoin the Breakers in April. The Breakers owner Matt Walsh says they didn't want to lose Webster midway through the season, but didn't anticipate an offer the size of the one from China, although he won't reveal the amount. The Breakers are second to bottom in the NBL standings with just 4 wins this season. Welsh media claims it's going to cost New Zealand Rugby $400,000 if they want Brad Moore released from the Scarlets so he can join the All Blacks coaching staff. Moore, who was an assistant at the Crusaders this year, is understood to be part of Foster's coaching staff, alongside current Hurricanes coach John Plumtree, former All Blacks and Ireland scrum coach Greg Feek, and current defence coach Scott McLeod. That's the news.
Debate over adventure tourism.
Being registered is a strong signal that operator takes health and safety.
I mean, I suppose it's one thing to be asking New Zealanders, but what about people who are coming here from overseas? They're not going to know who WorkSafe is.
I encourage them to ask that question of, are you a registered operator?
Families worn out.
The red tape and the bureaucracy behind making the decision has slowed the process down all the way along.
As events catch up with hospital staff.
Several doctors and nurses have actually gone on stress leave.
Politics and People, Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast, taking us through to midnight tomorrow from our Met Service. Northland, Auckland, including Coromandel and Bay of Plenty, isolated showers, clearing this afternoon, becoming cloudy tomorrow. Waikato to Wellington, including the Central High Country and Waited Upper, occasional showers, clearing tonight. A few showers returning tomorrow night. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, occasional showers, some heavy and thundery in Gisborne, clearing tonight, becoming fine. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, a few showers, clearing tonight. Excuse me. Occasional rain developing tomorrow. Gale northwesterlies in Canterbury tomorrow. Buller to Fiordland, fine at first. A few showers from tonight, turning to rain with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms tomorrow afternoon. Otago and Southland, a few showers, clearing tomorrow morning. Rain developing tomorrow afternoon, possibly heavy. At the Chatham Islands, rain, heavy with possible thunderstorms, easing to showers tomorrow. It is nearly 8 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Paul. And this is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. An inquiry into complaints of sexual assault against a former Labour Party staffer has cast major doubt on the complainant's version of events. The public airing of a range of allegations put serious pressure on the most senior party officials and the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, back in September. She ordered 2 reviews, one from Maria Dew, QC, to look at the substance of the claims and the other to look at how the party handled the whole situation. Criticisms of party officials ultimately forced the resignation of Nigel Haworth as president at the height of the controversy. The staffer at the centre of the allegations also resigned, but has always denied the sexual assault allegations. The new president, Claire Szabo, presented the findings at Parliament.
The report is clear that the most serious allegations, those of sexual assault, were not established. Other allegations of sexual harassment were also found not to be established. Some allegations that related to overbearing and aggressive conduct were found to be established, but were found not to meet the threshold of unlawful bullying.
Ms Ardern says she's acknowledged the party failed to meet expectations and has new leadership in place. The complainants worked with Maria Dew on her investigation and were consulted about how much of the report would be made public. Ms Ardern said the bulk of it would remain confidential, but defended releasing the executive summary.
We've been very conscious of people's well-being, all parties, the complainant, the respondent, all the way through, and being very clear the full report will not be released, should not be released. But of course, there was an expectation that some indication of the conclusions that would be reached would be, but maintaining the privacy of the individuals involved has been incredibly important.
And that was Jacinda Ardern. Our political editor, Jane Patterson, joins us now. Good evening, Jane. What did Maria Dew have to say about the primary complainant's evidence and allegations?
So basically, Maria Dew interviewed a number of the complainants as well as other party members, and also looked at about 28,000 Facebook and text messages between those people and a wider group. And basically she came up with a conclusion that she found no evidence for the allegation of the serious sexual assault that was said to have happened at the Respondent's house in February 2018, that basically all of the evidence given and those messages just didn't back up that claim. There were also two other allegations of sexual harassment by the primary complainant and two other young women. She also found no basis for those claims. Now, she did find that there was a bit of basically obnoxious or inappropriate behaviour that the respondent acknowledged and said that, you know, it shouldn't have happened. But effectively, there's nothing that warrants disciplinary action. And I must note too, the respondent, the man who was a staffer at Parliament, has denied these allegations all the way through, but he resigned his job in the middle of this controversy.
Maria Dew also addresses the fact that in her report she confirms that the principal complainant and the accused were in fact in a personal relationship at the time. What does she have to say about that and the issue of consent?
So she said this was quite a sensitive and difficult area, and I note too, only the executive summary, a 9-page summary, has been released. There's a lot more in the actual report that has been kept public to keep people's private details sensitive, but it does say, it notes this 8-month relationship, and it basically says that, you know, in the course of these interviews there were various issues about consent at one time or another in the relationship, and it's difficult, but basically Maria Dew said that the evidence within that and in the relationship still didn't stack up to what she had seen as a sexual assault. Now, she doesn't really make any comment about the fact that they were in a relationship. It was more the context of the communication and the interaction that she had with the complainant.
In the course of the media coverage of this issue, there was information from the complainant in which she insisted that she had forwarded details of a sexual assault complaint to the party and the party's General Secretary, Ms. Diana Lacey. Are we any clearer about whether the party had this information or not?
Of course, Lisa, one of the big discrepancies during the reporting of this was we had the party officials, including the party president Nigel Haworth, who of course resigned, saying that they had not been alerted to any serious sexual allegations, and they were adamant about that. Now, that went as far as saying that a March email that the complainant said she sent to party officials, Diana Lacey, the party secretary, as you referred to, and also Simon Mitchell, another official who was put on a panel to look at these complaints, they both said, we never received anything, either verbally or an email. Now, an email was presented to media, and it basically was to show that the email had been sent to these two people, and it had two attachments on the copy of this email. Now, Maria Dew said she can't find any evidence that that attachment was ever sent, and that backs up statements made by Simon Mitchell a month or so ago, who actually got a forensic expert into his computer to prove that he never received that attachment. Furthermore, Maria Dew says that she can't find any evidence that these complaints, or she said it was improbable that the complaints were ever brought up with these the party officials verbally, which is another thing that the complainants had insisted had happened.
So did Nigel Haworth resign for nothing?
Jacinda Ardern was asked whether he is due an apology, whether he was forced to resign, when actually there are massive question marks over the credibility of these claims. She said that it was an honourable decision of his. It had become clear to him that the party needed new leadership. But I think, given this information, given particularly the fact that the report really can't find any evidence that these party officials did receive this information, I think will probably stick in the craw of Mr. Haworth. But in saying that, both Ms Ardern and the new party president say the party did not handle this as they should have. So actually there was some blame there for the way that they interacted with the complainants, and also that the party did not have formalised good processes of dealing with complaints about allegations of a sexual nature. So all of that has been addressed. So yes, Ms Ardern said he fell on his sword. It was an honourable decision, and it was needed at that point to show that the party was taking it seriously.
What about the man at the centre of the allegations? He's maintained his innocence throughout. The report says in its substance that basically the most serious of these allegations are not substantiated in any way, shape or form, and he resigned his position. So what happens for him now?
The Prime Minister again was asked about that. All she would say is that he has resigned when asked if there was a way back for him. Now, he worked in the Labour Party leader's office at Parliament and quit in the middle of it. So really, we've had a statement from him through his lawyer today saying that this really vindicates him and vindicates his repeated denials. And he just said that it had taken a very heavy toll on him and his family, and thanks supporters. There was also a warning from his lawyer that any media naming him would face legal action potentially. And of course, RNZ has not named the respondent or the complainant throughout this process.
In terms of the politics of this, Paula Bennett led the charge for this on National and was very public and very vocal. Has she had anything to say on the findings?
Not yet. We are going to the National Party to see if they have any views. I mean, a lot of people had advocated on behalf of these complainants based on the information that they were given. There were certain media outlets, of course, who ran the stories. So it'll be very interesting to see how the likes of Paula Bennett, who was very vocal on behalf of these complainants, will respond. Now, of course, we must say we do not want to be getting into any space either that we are suggesting that people should not come forward with sexual assault allegations, that there's any victim blaming here or anything like that at all. We are reporting the conclusions of this report, but there are going to be various people in this story who might look back on some of the information that was given to them and maybe question why or how that came to them.
Thanks, Jane. That is our political editor, Jane Patterson. And Checkpoint has tried to contact the principal complainant and National's Paula Bennett, who led the charge on this politically at the time. Neither could be reached for comment. It's believed an anonymous tip-off prompted a police investigation into New Zealand-born multi-millionaire businessman Sir Ron Braley, who is now facing child pornography charges. Sir Ron, who was knighted in 1988, set up Braley Investments in the 1960s. The 82-year-old now lives in the affluent Sydney suburb of Point Piper. ABC crime reporter Mark Reddy is covering the story and explains what happened.
Sir Ron Braley has been charged with 6 offences relating to alleged possession of child pornography. The 82-year-old investor was handcuffed at Sydney International Airport yesterday morning after he was stopped by Border Force officials. He was carrying a small suitcase, and police are alleging that he was on his way to Fiji. Inside that case, it's alleged there was a large amount of child pornography material found on a laptop and also on some other electronic devices. He was then handcuffed in the airport and taken to a police station where he was formally charged. He has now been granted conditional bail and he will face court in February next year.
What do we know about this investigation and perhaps how long it had been going on for?
So this investigation hadn't been going on for too long. It began in August. New South Wales Police were involved in this investigation, and we understand from sources close to the investigation that this was the result of anonymous tip-off from a member of the public, and police had been closely monitoring the 82-year-old, who of course is a huge name here in Australia and in New Zealand.
You say he was heading to Fiji. Do we know for what purpose, whether he regularly visited there?
We don't really know any circumstances surrounding his travel to Fiji. All we know is that he was planning to board yesterday morning, and he was stopped by Border Force officials. But at this stage, police haven't really gone into too much detail as to how they managed to stop him and what his movements would have been if he was on his way to Fiji. So that still remains a bit unclear.
So he has been granted bail, you say, to where, and do we know anything of the conditions?
Well, at this stage, we know that he is unable to leave the country. He can't actually fly out overseas until he faces court in February. What we also know is that Sir Ron Braley lives in one of the most expensive suburbs in Australia, in Point Piper, down on Sydney Harbour, and he lives only around the corner from our former Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull. So it's a really affluent area, a lot of really expensive and large homes down there, and he's required to live at that address until his court appearance. As for the other conditions, those will probably come out in court in February, but all we do know is that he's unable to travel and he must reside at that address.
Has there been any comment from Sir Ron Braley or his legal team?
Well, we've had camera crews outside his home this morning and there has been absolutely no movement. His lawyer hasn't returned any calls from the media at this stage. I'd imagine his lawyer would be sort of mounting his case, which will go to court in February. But of course, this has got a lot of attention here in Australia. We know that he founded R.A. Braley Investments in 1961 with no capital, and now 23 years later, it's New Zealand's largest company by market capitalisation. So he's known in Australia for turning around companies, for helping facilitate takeovers, and he really is the guy who people go to in the corporate world if they want to try and strengthen a firm. So this has really come as a shock to the business community. We also know he is an active member in the community. He was admitted as a knight for services to business management and the community, and also he was a former trustee of the Sydney Cricket Ground, and only last year a scholarship was put in his name for cricket players in rural and regional Australia. So, of course, he's widely known in both the business world and now the sporting world. So this really has come as a shock to many Australians and, of course, I imagine a lot of New Zealanders.
And that's the ABC crime reporter Mark Reddy. Police divers have expressed their frustration at being within metres of the body believed to have been missing White Island tour guide Hayden Marshall Inman before dangerous swells thwarted their attempts to recover him. The admission was made in a news conference this afternoon where the police announced they would be scaling back their search to find Mr Marshall Inman's body and that of 17-year-old Australian Winona Langford, who are believed to have been swept out to sea. Anusha Bradley is in Whakatane and filed this report.
Deputy Commissioner Mike Clement says aerial pictures from the 9th of December show the bodies of Hayden Marshall Inman and Winona Langford by a stream. But heavy rainfall overnight appears to have caused a 1.5 metre wave of water and sediment, which most likely washed them both downstream into the sea. Based on currents and local knowledge, the focus of the search is now a 70-kilometre stretch of ocean between White Island and the East Cape.
We are deeply sorry that we haven't until this time been able to return those bodies. That has been our mission throughout, firstly to save people and then to recover people. It hurts us and it hurts our people and it hurts everybody in this community when we don't achieve that purpose. We haven't given up, but what I'm here to do is to signal to everybody that we've reached a phase where we are literally in the hands of the sea.
Mr Marshall Inman's body was spotted in the water near White Island last Wednesday. Mr Clement says divers got within metres of his body but were unable to retrieve it.
They got very close to the body, within metres of the body. So we just couldn't get close enough in a safe enough way because the wave action was such that there was 2.5 to 3 metre swells out there. And that was very dangerous for the boat in that close, given the depth of the water. So without getting into too much technical difficulty, the reality is I can promise you those people, that's what they come here to do. That was their intent, and we didn't manage it on that occasion. and we're deeply disappointed about that.
He says while the search will continue, the recovery operation will scale down in the next 2 days.
I can assure everybody, and I have assured everybody, that the national assets that you see here now have been here previously. If there's a need for them, based on anything that we learn subsequently, those assets will return. For the time being, the dive squad, the Deodar and the Eagle helicopter will be here for a day or two longer at least.
After a 2-day hiatus due to bad weather, the Police National Dive Squad plans to head back into the water at first light tomorrow. Meanwhile, a rahui preventing fishing or collection of seafood remains in place out of respect for the dead, the missing and their families. But swimming and boating will be allowed from Friday. In Whakatane for Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
It is 5:25 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let us know your thoughts on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. I'm interested in what you make of this report released today, the report into the conduct of a member of the New Zealand Labour Party. Remember, that was around sexual assault allegations. Well, the findings say that the man was overbearing and aggressive, but there is no evidence of sexual assault, harassment or of misconduct. None of those things have been established. You can get in touch via text 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. More than 100 years since the Tūhoe pacifist Rua Kenana was unlawfully imprisoned, the Crown has today pardoned him and acknowledged its wrongs. Close to 200 of Rua Kenana's descendants gathered at Parliament to witness the final reading of the Rua Kenana Pardon Bill, a law seeking to restore his mana and that of his people. Te Aniwa Hurehanganui was there.
The descendants of Rua Kenana wept as they were welcomed to Parliament. Their people were victims of one of the worst Crown invasions in history, one which saw 2 of their young men shot dead and their leader, Rua Kenana, unlawfully convicted for resisting arrest. Kaumātua Richard Tumarai struggled to find the words to describe the pain his people have endured ever since.
It's about the murder, the rape, the looting and all the other atrocities that were committed by the Crown when they invaded Maungapoa in 1916. It's really hard, for me personally, hard to put into words. But to actually put it into words, it's probably more than I can say.
Rua Kenana built a peaceful religious community at Maunga Pohatu in the heart of Te Urewera, but the government grew suspicious of the Tūhoe prophet and accused him of sedition for objecting to the conscription of Māori men into the armed forces. In 1916, the government ordered more than 70 armed officers to invade his settlement and later convicted him for moral resistance. The Māori Development Minister, Nanaia Mahuta, says the Rua Kenana Pardon Bill acknowledges the Crown's wrongs.
We are here because a generation of descendants of Rua Kenana fought long and hard to have him recognised in a way that upholds his mana, but also the woeful way in which the Crown had treated him and the wrongful arrest that had occurred as a result.
Nanaia Mahuta shed tears during the bill's third reading as she outlined the many atrocities brought upon the Tūhoe people.
Tūhoe recollections of these events are that some of the women were raped by police. This incident has been described by some historians as the last shooting of the New Zealand Wars Te Pūtake o Te Riri. It is an incident that has dwelt long in the Tūhoe memory.
The Pardon Bill includes an apology, a declaration to restore Rua Kenana's mana and a Crown acknowledgement of the lasting pain it caused. Labour's Rino Tiri Kātene also surprised descendants with a gift, a tokotoko or walking stick carved from a palisade of one of Rua Kenana's houses, which was gifted to his grandfather in the 1950s.
It's been cherished by my whānau, and but what better time to return it to the whānau than on this occasion.
15-year-old Wewhetu Temara grew up knowing the stories about Rua Kenana and the Crown's treatment of him. His one wish from here on is that more New Zealanders will know the stories too.
I think just our people from Maunga Pohatu know, but not the rest. So yeah, I think everyone else needs to learn about it. I think I'd like everyone to know what he stood for and what he believed in. The Crown done something wrong and they're acknowledging that.
Third reading has been hailed a milestone for the Tūhoe people, but the journey hasn't ended yet. The pardon will be finalised on Saturday when the Governor-General grants the royal assent at a ceremony in Maunga Pohatu. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko te aniwa, hurihanga nui, aho.
Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, as authorities scale back the search for two people missing off Whakaari White Island, we speak to GNS volcanologist Graham Leonard about the volcano's activity. A wild goose chase at Auckland's Western Springs Park rounds up nearly 100 birds. We'll tell you where they're off to. And we're at a police dog Christmas party in Canterbury. Remember, you can get in touch about anything you've heard on the program this evening. Interested in your thoughts if you are an Aucklander on these geese at Western Springs. They're pretty aggro sometimes. They're lucky they're not turkeys today. Do get in touch. You can text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email. checkpoint@rnz.co.nz is our address. Paul Brennan's here with the headlines.
Thank you, Lisa. The Prime Minister says she will leave a report into allegations of sexual assault by a Labour Party staffer to speak for itself, and she won't comment on specific findings. A QC has found there is not enough information to back up the allegations of sexual assault and harassment. The report by the QC says she did find claims the staffer was overbearing and aggressive were substantiated, but it didn't meet the threshold of unlawful bullying. The police say it's possible the two bodies still missing after last Monday's eruption on Whakaari White Island will never wash up on land. The search for 40-year-old local guide Hayden Marshall Inman and 17-year-old Australian tourist Winona Langford is being scaled back. The Deputy Police Commissioner Mike Clement says helicopter and Air Force planes will continue sweeps of the area. The New Zealand-born businessman Sir Ron Braley is facing a child pornography charge in Australia after an anonymous tip-off. The New South Wales police have confirmed an 82-year-old man was arrested at Sydney International Airport yesterday and found a large amount of child porn found on his laptop and other devices. The police have yet to name him. The ABC reports the police investigation began in August, triggered by a tip-off from a member of the public. The man shot by police on the grounds of a Hastings primary school yesterday was carrying an imitation pistol. He remains in a stable condition in hospital and will be charged with offences under the Arms Act. The Christchurch Mayor, Leanne Dalzell, has released previously undisclosed details about donations from an auction which funded her re-election campaign. The information was released after pressure from losing mayoral candidate John Minto. The auction consisted of items donated by Ms Dalzell's husband, Rob Davidson, and raised $40,000. Those are the headlines.
Thanks, Paul. And if you're just tuning in, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen, and it is time for Business News with Nona Peltier. Nona. So, the government's announced plans to reform laws covering the Reserve Bank. Have we got some details about what exactly is planned?
Yeah, we do. So, they looked at the first phase was the review that led to the establishment of a governing body that would sit around and decide things in terms of a consensus on how things should go with the Reserve Bank's decision on monetary policy and so forth. The second phase was looking at the underlying pieces of the legislation that governs it, which is the Reserve Bank Act. They're going to get rid of that act and they're going to replace it with two new ones. One that covers institutions and the other one that covers the interests of consumers, that is the depositors. And so I guess from the point of view of the institution, it's really to improve the financial stability of the system. And what's more interesting is this new piece of legislation, which is about the depositors' protection. So once they decide on the third phase how it all becomes implemented, there'll be some insurance for minimum deposits of or maximum deposits of $50,000.
So if your $50,000 goes down a sinkhole because a bank collapses or whatever, you'll be protected.
Yes. So if you had more than $50,000 in the bank, if you're lucky enough to have that, that you should spread your risk. So we'll encourage savers to potentially put their money into other financial lenders. And it's not just banks. This is going to cover any financial institution which allows you to deposit and save in some kind of an account. Now, the rules have not yet been worked out. That's going to be happening in the early next year when they go through the third phase. So all the details, how that's going to cover, say it's an insurance, so who's going to pay? Probably the consumers, because that's how it usually works.
Okay, so property market, you've got some data, more data that suggests it is picking up?
Yeah, now this is data from Colliers International. They're a realtor, but they specialize in commercial real estate, deal with investors primarily. And they do surveys regularly, and their latest survey shows that the commercial property sector is their confidence is at a 3-year high. So that's pretty strong. That's commercial property. We're talking industrial, office, retail, particularly industrial and office, and it's across the board. Now, also, people looking at buying investment properties that are homes, residential properties, also at a very strong level.
Interesting, given that sort of every policy move the government has made around housing is to stop that kind of investment, second houses.
I can tell you it's not working because...
According to this data.
No, because the outlook for the residential property market is very strong. A net positive 41% of the respondents are expecting prices and the outlook to strengthen over the next 12 months. And all of this is tied to low interest rates. So as long as low interest rates are there, the investors are going to be looking to buy.
Shall we take a quick canter around the markets?
Yes,
Mona?
well, it's the same story. Very little change in terms of our dollar. But look, to start with the markets. So 0.6% a rise, 69 points up to close at 11,330. That's pretty close to our record high. Now, the New Zealand dollar is buying at 65.6 US cents, 95.8 Australian, and you'll be interested in this, 50.1 British pence. And that's really because the hard Brexit exit is still on the table and the market doesn't really like that.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with our business update. A soldier has been arrested at Linton military camp amid suspicion they're part of a far-right extremist group. The Defence Force has yet to confirm what, if any, charges the soldier is facing. But the arrest has raised concerns far-right groups could be infiltrating New Zealand's military. Charlotte Cook reports.
The extremist Christian bodybuilding group Wargus Christi has claimed online the arrested soldier is part of their organisation. In an internet chat room, members spoke about how the man was removed from the group after news of an investigation. Another hoped their brother was going to be okay. A Defence Force spokesperson confirmed the arrest to RNZ.
There was a cordon in place in part of the Linton housing area attached to Linton military camp on Friday. New Zealand police executed a search warrant and one soldier was taken into military custody.
They said no further details were able to be released because of an ongoing criminal investigation with New Zealand police. RNZ has been told there will be one-on-one monitoring of the soldier at all times. An activist group, Auckland Peace Action, says infiltration through defence and police forces is a common and proven tactic for right-wing groups. Its spokesperson, Valerie Morse, says the military can be a breeding ground for anti-Muslim behaviour.
The whole mindset of the military has effectively been about criminalising Muslims for at least the last 20 years. And so we shouldn't be surprised then that this is the kind of ideology, this is acceptable ideology within the New Zealand Defence Force.
Valerie Morse says it's alarming the Wargus Christi's ethos of blood, honour and brotherhood could be permeating New Zealand's military. Massey University's Paul Spoonley is a professor in the far right and anti-Semitic movement. He says he's seen people in the armed forces with an online presence, but believes the numbers are limited.
There appear to be people who are in the Defence Force who contribute to online discussions, and I've certainly been concerned through this year at some of the comments that I've seen which appear to come from Defence Force personnel, which are really very anti-Muslim and anti-Semitic.
He says the Defence Force attracts people who can be interested in far-right ideals.
I think there's a bit of an issue that the Defence Force tends to attract people who might be sympathetic to those views, but the Defence Force itself have been working very hard to make sure that they are not a recruiting ground or a breeding ground for far-right extremists.
The Minister of Defence, Ron Mark, wouldn't confirm if the soldier who is in custody was being monitored.
What I take strength and confidence in is that this has happened, and the military are clearly very observant, doing their job. I'd like to think that any government department has the security and interests of this nation at heart, would be monitoring itself as well.
It's unclear if the man will go through the judicial system or the military court-martial process. For Checkpoint, Charlotte Cook.
It is almost 20 to 6. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. We have just received a statement from the respondent. This is the man at the centre of the sexual assault allegations who was a member of the Labour Party. Now, Maria Dew QC has released her findings today, and she has established that there is insufficient evidence to prove the very serious allegations made. So this statement is from the respondent's lawyer. It says, more than 3 months ago, I committed to fully cooperate with and participate in the Dew inquiry. I have since answered all the questions and provided all the information asked of me. I would like to thank Maria Dew QC for her thorough investigation and fair and transparent process. As the report states, the serious allegations made against me are untrue. The information, witness statements and messages considered by Maria Dew QC provided compelling evidence to support this finding. Simply put, the events described in the serious allegations did not happen. These allegations and the media commentary over the past few months have taken a toll on myself and my family. I thank those who have supported us during this time. That is the member of the Labour Party who was at the centre of those serious allegations made. The Dew report out today has cleared him of those allegations and but said that he had overly aggressive behaviour that did not reach the legal bar for bullying. A Waikato woman who still bears the scars of burns to 60% of her body has endured more than 25 surgeries and almost 5 decades hiding from herself. Donna Gregory Marshall was burnt on her arms, back and shoulders after she was doused in boiling water when she pulled on a dangling jug cord as an 11-month-old. What followed was years of surgery and a struggle for acceptance. Donna, who is now 56, says her first memory of what happened was terrible teasing and name-calling at school, and a teacher telling her to harden up.
All I remember is bad stuff, like being called names, hideous names.
Can you remember what they called you?
Yeah, burnt toast, Greg's coffee, Marmite features, those sort of things. Yeah, the worst one was burnt toast. I hated that. Hated it.
That must have been like a punch in the gut as a young kid.
Yeah, well, and there was really nothing I could do about it. My father was a policeman, so it's not like I could hit back or anything, because I think in the back of my mind I was always thinking, I'd be the one to get into trouble. I don't know, but I never did. It was my brother that actually had my back.
And looked out for you?
All the time.
So when you were just a baby, 11 months old around about, you pulled on a jug cord, was it?
Yes.
And what happened?
It went... I think I must have fallen forward because I've got burns, which I didn't know about until about 5 years ago, that I've actually got burns in the back of my head and up the back of my neck. But so I fell forward, it's all down my back and like my arms and sort of across here, and there's wee splotches.
So across your chest?
No, just on my back, but there are a few bits here, not a lot. It's on my back.
And so how old were you when the major surgery started?
Well, that I can remember.
Yes.
I was about 11 or 12. I was in intermediate school. I was just finishing Form 1. And because I was born and bred in Whangarei, that's where I was burnt. And I remember my mum had moved to Te Awamutu, and I was all by myself in Whangarei with her best friend was coming in and looking after me. But one of the most hideous things that I will never ever forget was being put in the bath after I'd had the skin graft done, and they take the donor site off.
So they removed the skin from a good part of your body?
Yeah. And then, but after about 10 days, they put me in the bath and told me to take it off with the water, and it was so painful. I must have been in the bath for a couple of hours, and each time they would rip it. Rip. I was absolutely beside myself. Absolutely just... And Mum wasn't there, so it was like, yeah, it was just horrible.
How many surgeries and grafts do you think you have had over the years?
Probably about 25.
Surgeries?
Mm-hmm.
And would all of those have been for skin grafts too?
Grafts, Z-plasties, what they call Z-plasties, like all of these. I call them my Zorro.
So these are crisscross marks on your arms.
Yeah.
And that is where...
The release thing, them. They release them because your arms contract. Yeah. And I actually just found out that I can have some more because I've got a few other issues on my back and one of these arms.
So
one of these arms, how many have I got too?
What are those issues on your back?
They're tight. Very tight.
And so does the skin tighten over time?
Yep. Mm.
And so the marks that I can see on your arm, where there are very definitely V shapes or Z shapes, that is when they're basically scoring your skin to loosen the tension?
Yeah, like crackle. Yeah, they are. They're just releasing it.
What effect do you think that had on you as a young kid and a teenager, being treated like that by your peers?
I actually was quite withdrawn. And I only had a few select friends, really, who I'm actually still friends with today because we ended up moving back to Whangarei. And, I just kind of stayed. Yeah, I didn't do, like, any sports, or I didn't like swimming, hated it.
Why was that?
Because I had to wear a bathing suit and people could see my scars and I hated it. And then the bullying would start all over again. And teenage girls are the worst. They are so bad. They're so bitchy. Even back then.
Now, do you think people treat you differently?
It's me. It's how I take it on board. Before, I'm not saying that I have good days. Sometimes I have really bad days. Only just a couple of weeks ago, I drove to Chartwell to Hamilton, and there was a whole group of people around where the car was, where I'd happened to park the car. I don't know where they came from, but they just appeared. I wouldn't get out of the car. I drove home because I just froze. It was like I had a panic attack because I just started wearing it. It's only in the last 7 years that I've actually worn sleeveless dresses. And it was kind of like...
So did you have your arms exposed on that day?
Yeah.
And so what was your thinking about getting out of the car?
That I'd get bullied. Or that they'll stare at me. And I don't like that. And I know that it's just curiosity, but at that moment, I couldn't cope with it. So my way of coping was to drive home. Yeah, that's how I cope with it. But other times, sometimes I'll just say to people, you can ask me what happened, or...
So it's only in the last few years that you've started to wear bare arms to not cover your burns.
Yeah.
What's changed that helped you do that?
Actually, it was a personal incident that happened, and when it did happen at the time, it took me right back to school and being bullied.
Did someone say something to you?
Yeah. And it was actually the breakup of my marriage, actually. But about 6 months later, I suddenly thought, gee, if I can survive that, I'm going to wear sleeveless dresses.
Do you swim these days?
I do. Yes. I've got 3 bathing suits, and I go cruising, and I get out in my togs. I still have panic attacks. So, one of my goals this year is to go swimming at the pools in Hamilton.
So, to a place that is very public, where there will be lots of people.
Yeah.
Why do you want to push yourself to do that?
Because it makes you grow, and it actually it kind of like actually educates people that just because I have scars doesn't mean to say that I should hide away, because sometimes I feel that people should say that. Yeah.
Have you spent quite a few years hiding away?
All my life. Yeah, I was 49 when I came out, when I stripped off. Yeah. And I've got a friend in Tauranga who took a whole lot of photos of me, and I just felt so liberated. It was just like so empowering when I finally actually accepted the fact that, well, are you going to go around wearing a cardigan for the rest of your life? You know? Going to wear your nanny cardi sort of thing? Because I do always carry a cardigan in the car, actually, just in case I do feel comfortable if I go out. Yeah.
So when you had all of those surgeries, many of which were in your teenage years, when did it stop hurting after those operations, physically?
After each surgery, probably it would be at least a couple of months. Yeah. And like all my surgeries that I had, even as an adult, my mum came and looked after me, which was really hard because she always still feels guilty, and even now, but even though I would never blame her, it was an accident. You know, I was just one of these kids that was walking at 11 months. Yeah.
And she was in another room when it happened?
She was actually running a bath for my brother.
Do you recall when you were a young girl, when you looked in the mirror and realised that you looked different to others?
I don't think it was when I was a child. It was when I was an adult. Yeah. It was, now what was it? I can't remember, but I know I had to look at my back. Yeah, and that was just, yeah, I couldn't cope with that for a little while because it was so ugly. Sorry. But you get over it. Well, you have to, because you're the only one. You know, no one else can help you, so. But I realised then, because it's kind of hard when you're always the different one. And like when I was younger, like when I was nursing, you know, I used to get told then, you know, by not the girls so much, well actually no, not the girls that were in my class, but other girls, you know, and they used to say things like, oh, you know, you'd never get a boyfriend and you'd never do this and you never did that. So I became quite promiscuous, for the want of a better word, because that was the only way that I could, you know, that I thought that I could get a boyfriend. But in actual fact, it wasn't like that at all, because, you know, I did eventually meet one guy and he just said, I don't know why you did, you know, but it's just because that was me. Yeah, that was me.
When you say you looked at your back and you thought that you looked ugly, do you think differently now?
It's not so bad. Yeah. No, not so bad because again I realise it's just it can't go away. It's not going anywhere, and unless I'm going to cover up, you know, for the rest of my life and not. I actually realised too that when I go swimming, because when I did go swimming on the odd occasion, I would wear a t-shirt. But in actual fact, that actually drew more attention to me because people would say, why have you got a t-shirt on? Or some pools, because I was actually covering up to protect as well. I had a special suit made actually, we all did actually. And people would say, why are you wearing that? You know, why are you wearing it? And it's like, well, I have to wear it to protect my scars, you know. But whereas now, if I just wear my togs, if people are looking at me, well, good on them, you know.
How important do you think, as well as the treatment of your physical injuries, was helping with mental health? And did you get that attention as as a burns victim and as you got older as well?
It wasn't until I'd had that last lot of surgery and I was at Middlemore Hospital and the burn support group came in and she said to me, did I have any issues? And I said, oh, no, And then she said something about swimming and, that was 2.5 hours later I walked out of her office and I was like so drained and realised that, wow, I do have issues. So I started going to their regular meetings and things. And because I had such huge support from my family and my friends, nobody treated me any differently. It was me. It was all me. But I think probably because I was overweight, and I've always been overweight, and with my scars, it kind of compounded. And I also wear glasses. So it was kind of like when I was a teenager and, in my young 20s, it was like, it was all happening for me. I wasn't I wasn't a babe, I used to cover up. Yeah, and I wore coloured contact lenses. Oh, mind you, I still do. I like them. But I wore coloured contact lenses so that people would look here rather than here.
So you wanted them to look straight in your eyes and not let their eyes go down to your arms?
I mean, eventually they would, I knew that, but it was just a bit of a deterrent.
How much have your scars faded over time? Or changed?
I don't think they have. No. I don't think they have. I mean, they're smooth because, you have to constantly moisturise them because they get quite dry. Otherwise they're all cracky.
How would you describe your journey and where you're at now?
I wouldn't say it's been easy, but it's good now, and it'll only get better. I've had several opportunities. I've just come back from the World Burns Congress, which was all paid for by Burn Support. It was just the most amazing thing that I've ever been to. It was just like about 1,000 other burn support people, and it's burn survivors. And it's amazing to be in a room or in a place where if someone's not burnt, they're the minority, if you know what I mean. And just looking at everybody, because it was at the Hilton, and everywhere you looked, there was just survivor after survivor, and it was just like, I'm really comfortable here. I'm so glad that I went. Really, really glad. Changed my life. Between that and the retreats, because they really do make you feel that you're okay.
And that is Donna Gregory Marshall, a burns survivor. If you want to watch that interview, we'll put it up on our website. Her goal for next year, as she said, is to go to a public pools in Hamilton in togs that show her scars. Donald Trump says his expected impeachment by members of Congress overnight New Zealand time will be an unprecedented and unconstitutional abuse of power by his opponents. The Democrats have drawn up 2 articles of impeachment claiming the president committed an abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. But in a furious letter sent to Capitol Hill, the president compares the impeachment process to the Salem witch trials of the 1600s. CNN's Caitlin Collins reports.
To impeach the President of the United States for that is a disgrace, and it's a mark in our country.
On the eve of a House vote to impeach him, President Trump fired off a missive to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, accusing her of violating her oath of office and cheapening the importance of the very ugly word impeachment. Writing in a 6-page letter that read like his Twitter feed, the president claimed, "You are declaring open war on American democracy." The president accusing Pelosi of offending Americans of faith by saying she prays for him. Quote, "When you know this statement is not true, unless it is meant in a negative sense."
I still pray for the president.
In his crusade against the 2 articles of impeachment printed on White House letterhead, the president claimed more due process was afforded to those accused in the Salem witch trials. The president ending his letter by telling Pelosi that the American people will not soon forgive your perversion of justice and abuse of power. As House Democrats head toward the impeachment vote, the president told reporters today he hasn't been paying attention, but made no mention of his scathing letter.
I'm not watching. I've not seen it. Look, it's a hoax. The whole impeachment thing is a hoax.
And he made clear he takes no responsibility for potentially being the third president in U.S. history to be impeached.
No, I don't take any, zero, to put it mildly. They took a perfect phone call that I had with the president of Ukraine, an absolutely perfect call. You know it, they all know it. Nothing was said wrong in that call.
The president said he doesn't think this letter that he sent to Nancy Pelosi is going to change the outcome of that impeachment vote. But he says essentially that he sent it because he said, I wanted for the purpose of history and to put my thoughts on a permanent and indelible record.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Paul Brennan. The Prime Minister says she will leave a report into allegations of sexual assault by a Labour Party staffer to speak for itself. Maria Dew QC has concluded there's not enough evidence to back up allegations of sexual assault and harassment. She also rejects the complainant's assertion that she emailed a document to Labour Party officials outlining the allegations and finds that it was improbable the complainant had even told them about it in person. Jacinda Ardern says she won't comment on any specific findings.
We are not here to seek blame, to seek malice. We are here to try and restore a process that should have been in place in the first place. We don't want any more harm done by this. It's time for us to draw a line in the sand and start trying to look after our Labour members.
Jacinda Ardern. Meanwhile, the man at the centre of the sexual assault allegations says the report came after a thorough investigation and a fair and transparent process. RNZ has not named the man, but in a media statement through his lawyer, he says he had answered all questions and provided all of the information asked of him. He says the report backs up his repeated denials of serious sexual assault. He says the allegations have taken a toll on him and his family. The New Zealand-born businessman Sir Ron Braley is facing child pornography charges in Australia after an anonymous tip-off. The New South Wales police have confirmed an 82-year-old man was arrested at Sydney International Airport yesterday and found a large amount of child porn on his laptop and other devices. The police have yet to name him. ABC crime reporter Mark Reddy is covering the story and told Checkpoint the investigation hasn't been going on for very long.
Began in August. New South Wales Police were involved in this investigation, and we understand from sources close to the investigation that this was the result of anonymous tip-off from a member of the public, and police had been closely monitoring the 82-year-old, who of course is a huge name here in Australia and in New Zealand.
ABC crime reporter Mark Reddy. The police say it's likely the bodies of the two people still missing after last Monday's eruption on Volcanic, White Island, were washed down a stream and out to sea. Deputy Police Commissioner Mike Clement says the search for the bodies of 40-year-old local tour guide Hayden Marshall Inman and 17-year-old Australian tourist Winona Langford is being scaled back. Mr Clement says the stream was checked on Friday by the Defence Force team that recovered the 6 bodies from the island.
They walked the stream 3 times. They came down the stream to the sea, they took a break, and then they went back up that stream to the area where we believe the 2 bodies had been, and then came back down again.
Mike Clement says heavy rain on the night of the eruption would have carried a lot of water down the stream. An unsuccessful Christchurch mayoral candidate wants an inquiry into donations made to Leanne Dalzell's election campaign. Donor names from an auction of items belonging to her husband have now been released after pressure from candidate John Minto. The auction raised $40,000. The information shows Ms Dalzell received 6 donations greater than $1,500, including one at nearly $18,000. Mr Minto says the non-disclosure is an insult to ratepayers.
Well, I think it's clear that the first expenses return she filed makes a mockery of democracy. This is a very experienced politician. She knows the rules down to the last detail.
John Minto, the unsuccessful Christchurch mayoral candidate, donations above $1,500 must be identified under the Electoral Act. The Solomon Islands Foreign Minister has defended his government's switch of allegiance to China, saying it gives his country new leverage with traditional partners. In a speech to Parliament, Jeremiah Manelli said the country made the right decision in joining 121 countries and recognising Beijing over Taiwan. The The Solomon Star reports Mr Manelli said it will complement existing relations, but also give it leverage with its traditional partners, including Australia and New Zealand. Small businesses affected by delays to Auckland City's rail link project could get rental assistance. Businesses need to meet certain criteria to qualify for the hardship program, including being alongside or close to CRL's alignment in the Albert Street area between the Victoria and Customs Street intersections. They need to have fewer than 20 full-time equivalent employees and be a tenant of the business site. An independent valuer will assess how much should be paid. It's 4 minutes past 6. On to sport now. The Black Caps pace bowler Trent Boult says he's ticking all the right boxes in his rehab as he looks to return for the Boxing Day cricket test against Australia in Melbourne. Boult missed the opening test in Perth with a rib injury as New Zealand suffered a 296-run thrashing. This afternoon he got through a practice session unscathed on a scorching day at the MCG, saying he felt good, but frustrated at having to sit out the Perth test and the drawn second test against England last month. The departing New Zealand Breakers guard Corey Webster says the opportunity to play top-level basketball in China happened by chance. Webster is off to Zhejiang Guansha in Hangzhou and will miss the remainder of the Breakers NBL season, although he plans returning to Auckland in April.
This just happened to come about. Obviously, maybe after the World Cup and, good games over here and playing well, teams, keep an eye on you and stuff like that. So I'm grateful for that, but I definitely wasn't out there looking for it.
Basketballer Corey Webster. Team New Zealand will get the chance to size up their challenges on home waters leading into the 2021 America's Cup. Auckland has today been confirmed to host one of 3 World Series regattas next year. And darts history has been made at the PDC World Champs in London, with England's Fallon Sherrick becoming the first woman to win a match at the event. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Kynan Gentry talks about completing Shipwrecked, the final work of his friend, mentor and maritime historian, the late Gavin McLean. Simon Morris looks back at a year of being at the movies. We have a window on the world of Anne-Marie Lavoisier, one half of the scientific team which isolated oxygen. And Bet Dam explains why she gave up her job as a war reporter. It's only encouraging them. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now we have the short forecast from Met Service through to midnight tomorrow, Thursday. Northland, Auckland, including Coromandel and Bay of Plenty, isolated showers clearing up, becoming cloudy tomorrow. Waikato to Wellington, including the Central High Country and Waited Upper, occasional showers clearing up tonight. A few showers return tomorrow night. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, occasional showers, some heavy and thundery in Gisborne, clearing tonight, becoming fine. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, a few showers clearing tonight. Occasional rain developing tomorrow. Gale northwesterlies at Canterbury tomorrow. Buller to Fiordland, fine at first, a few showers from tonight, turning to rain with heavy falls. Possible thunderstorms tomorrow afternoon. Otago and Southland, a few showers clearing tomorrow morning, and then rain developing tomorrow afternoon, possibly heavy. At the Chatham Islands, rain, heavy with possible thunderstorms, easing to showers tomorrow, just after 6:07.
Thanks, Paul. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National, and I'm Lisa Owen. And, heavy rainfall the night after Whakaari White Island erupted, combined with ash, created a sediment wave that likely flushed the bodies of 2 victims down a stream into the ocean. Local tour guide Hayden Marshall-Inman and 17-year-old Australian Winona Langford are still missing despite extensive searches and aerial photos initially showing the bodies near a stream. I asked GNS volcanologist Graham Leonard how active Whakaari is right now.
It looks like we've got some new shallow magma inside the volcano over the last week, and it's sitting there and it's driving a hot open vent, producing quite a lot of hot gas, but it's sitting there not doing a whole lot else right at the moment. Our expert calculated likelihood of another eruption has decreased slightly since yesterday to about 20 to 40%, but I guess importantly it's still about 100 times more likely than we were estimating in early December.
Okay, so can you explain why it's dropped so markedly from that figure we would have heard during the police recovery, which was up to 60% chance, wasn't it, of an eruption within a 24-hour period? So what specifically has changed?
Right. Well, so the main thing that was occurring leading up into the weekend was we were seeing a rise in tremor, a signal from gas and fluids moving around inside the volcano, which are often related to eruptions, not always, but often related to eruptions. So they were rising leading into the weekend, and then they dropped off after Friday night. So that certainly goes into that expert estimation of the likelihood of an eruption.
So in simple terms, is it settling down or not?
I think it's still highly uncertain what it's going to do. We're still only forecasting 24 hours out at the moment. There definitely is new shallow magma in the system there, and we're still saying, a 20 to 40% chance of that eruption in a 24-hour window. So it has stabilized a little bit in terms of the fact it's consistently putting out hot gas through an open vent at the moment, but it's still really uncertain what it's going to do next.
I understand you've been doing a bit of work to try and deduce exactly what happened after the eruption and overnight that day. So what can you tell us, particularly about the stream there and also the sediment?
Yeah, right. So the stream you're talking about is normally a bit of a trickle, really, a few litres per second, and we walk over it pretty regularly. We think what happened, piecing back the evidence of what happened on the evening after the eruption. There are really three pieces of evidence we're looking at. At about 11:30 to midnight, Met Service shows there was about 30 to 40 millimetres of very heavy rainfall, and also, secondly, looking back at our seismic signals, we picked up a signal about 11:48 p.m., which is indicative of a large mudslide, or a lahar, basically, a mud flow. It needs to be unusually large. It's a signal we haven't seen regularly or before. And then the last one is observations on the ground from searchers, and afterwards we could show the high marks around that stream, showing a large flow had been through, and the transportation and movement of large amounts of sediment and boulders. So it looks like, obviously, there was a lot of wet ash deposited by the eruption and the hot ash cloud, and then with heavy rain, there was a large mud flow that night down that stream.
Do you have any idea of the volume of that sediment?
No, we haven't made any estimate of that, but it looks like, talking to one of my colleagues, it looks like the whole basin area was kind of smoothed by being covered by a layer of wet ash by that hot ash cloud, maybe 10 or 20 centimetres thick across that whole area. So you can imagine with heavy rain over that whole basin area, that washing into that stream, that is quite a large volume of catchment of mud that could have gone in there.
So do you believe that those two things together, the volume of rain, the 30 to 40 mil of rain, combined with that sediment, sent it all flushing down the stream?
Yeah, definitely. And this is not at all uncommon with volcanoes. When we get a bunch of ash on the surface, it's common to have what we call secondary mudflows or lahars afterwards when rain falls on that soft ash, especially when it's already wet. It was already wet from the kind of wet, hot ash cloud that day. And it's really common to see mudflows straight afterwards from rainfall. I'm
just trying to imagine this stream. You said you walk across it, that volcanologists walk across it. So what is it, ankle deep normally or? No, I mean, it's the type of thing you could splash through. So it's like a puddle, in essence? Yeah, I mean, the estimate of one of my colleagues was kind of 2 to 5 litres per second. You imagine pouring that out of a bottle. That's a trickle. It's really a stream. So where does it come from and where does it end up? So it ends up in the ocean. It flows into the ocean right there, and it's a catchment up from springs and runoff on the volcano. So obviously you've got some amount of water coming out of springs on an active volcano, and you also catch rain that's basically fallen on the island, and it needs to drain out somewhere. You would be aware of the search area. I'm just trying to get an idea of distance. So the stream distance from the search area to the sea would be about how far? That whole area is only a matter of hundreds of metres. So I'm not exactly sure of the specific search area we're talking about there, but the distances from search areas and the coast, we're all talking within 100 or hundreds of metres. Finally, can you say whether or not White Island Whakaari right now is safe? Well, we wouldn't be sending our staff there at the moment. We consider the likelihood of an eruption to be too high, but we don't need to be sending our staff there at the moment either. We've got eyes on the volcano at the moment. Our monitoring equipment is working well, and we can monitor it remotely. So from our perspective, we don't need to go there, and we're not planning to go there. That's GNS volcanologist Graham Leonard. The government and the tourism industry have no clear plan to deal with the impacts that ballooning tourist numbers will have on the environment in the coming decades, according to a new report from the Environment Commissioner. Simon Upton today released the report, which says current government policies aren't enough to head off the worsening environmental impacts of tourism growth. Hamish Cardwell reports.
100% pure New Zealand, or so says the marketing. New Zealand sells itself as having a pristine, clean, green environment. But a report from Environment Commissioner Simon Upton says the popularity that image is creating among tourists is putting New Zealand's environment in peril. It says about 4 million visitors come to New Zealand every year, but this number could increase fourfold by 2050.
In selling access to these experiences, tourism risks becoming an extractive industry in its own right. And inexorable growth in numbers could risk an irreversible decline in both environmental quality and human experience of it.
He says the government has been a key player in the industry for decades.
Having allowed successive governments to create this industry, New Zealanders, I think, have every reason to call on governments to help manage its impacts.
The report says the projected volumes of tourists could overwhelm rural wastewater plants, polluting lakes and rivers. It says the biggest change in tourist patterns has been the huge numbers of people drawn to iconic sites, such as Milford or the Tongariro Crossing, and the government has taken a hands-off approach to managing these areas. Local Government New Zealand says the government's passed the buck onto local councils to deal with the impacts of swelling tourist numbers at these sites. Stuart Crosby says this has an acute impact on councils with small pools of ratepayers.
And they may only have a ratepayer base of, let's say, 10 or 20,000. There's nowhere in the world that they can sustain that. And it's okay just to develop, say, for example, new toilet facilities. But that's the easy part. It's actually the operational costs moving forward year on year on.
The report says there needs to be a significant investment in tourism infrastructure, such as roads and airports, to deal with the demand, but that current policies don't mitigate their environmental impacts. The head of tourism industry Aotearoa, Chris Roberts, says he agrees with the Commissioner that business as usual is not an option. But he says the report underplays the sector's commitment to sustainability.
We're not shirking our responsibility by any means, and we know we have to come up with new answers that will ensure that we have the very best tourism industry in New Zealand right out to a date like 2050.
Other dangers to the environment and the industry include biosecurity hazards from visitors that could harm New Zealand's ecosystem, as well as sea level rise and climate change. But Mr. Upton says there's a fundamental question about whether the tourism industry, which relies on international travel, can continue to exist in the face of the need to cut emissions to combat climate change.
But at the global level, there have to be serious doubts about whether tourism in its current shape and form can continue if we are to have a chance of heading off the worst consequences of climate change. That's the very uncomfortable truth of the matter, I think.
However, the report makes no recommendations about how to address these issues, with Mr. Upton now seeking feedback from the public and tourism industry before releasing another report with recommendations next year. The Ministry for Business, Innovation and Employment, the Department of Conservation and the Ministry for the Environment say in a joint response they are already working to mitigate the impacts of tourism on the environment, and the report will be a blueprint for the sector. For Checkpoint, ko Hamish Cardwell tēnei.
It's almost 18 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A literal wild goose chase at Auckland's Western Springs Park has managed to nab nearly 100 birds bound for a happy new life on a Northland farm. The geese have been creating chaos for months. Eventually, their excessive poo and aggressive behaviour made their stay untenable. So today, the gaggle of geese were corralled into pens and popped into a trailer headed north to begin their new lives. Nita Blake-Person has this story.
The wild geese of Western Springs. Their squawks and low-level assault, not to mention their poo, have taken their toll on the park. Auckland Council's Agnes McCormack says they had to go.
The problem we have with the large population is the volume of grass that they eat
and also the volume of faeces that they produce, which causes a real problem on our paths and on our grassed areas. And we have to water blast our paths once a day at least to be able to get on top of it.
The mission to move the geese began several weeks ago. The birds have been lured into pens with their favourite food.
They're giving them bread, which you're not supposed to give to birds, but this is what they're used to eating in the park because people actually feed them bread. So they've been using bread and bird feed, and they've been just getting them used to there's going to be food at this point, at this time, and the geese, they're led by their bellies. And so they recognise the team, and they were coming over. And yesterday, when the team were down on site just checking how everything was going, there was probably around 100 geese in the penned area just eating away. But this morning, it was a completely different story. Overnight, a huge branch had come down in the area where they would normally get fed, and most of the geese were on the other side of the lake. So we nearly had to pull the plug this morning because there were no geese in the penned area where they were being fed to get them used to that area, which was really disappointing because everybody was geared up to today was the day they were going to go to their new homes.
But what could have been a tragedy turned into a triumph. Over the course of the morning, 10 people wandered the park trying to convince the geese to change their minds.
It was a bit like the Pied Piper following the team who were feeding them, and then it would close the gates behind them and then just, corral them into the trailer. And then when they go into the trailer, they turn, because it's a horse box trailer, they can close the windows, and so it's dark, and that keeps the birds calm, so it's quite stress-free. And there's also hay on the bottom as well, so we were trying to make it as stress-free as possible for the birds.
Around 90 birds eventually embrace the temptation of a new home, but there's more work to be done. There are another 70 geese left in the park, but the council wants to get that number down to 20. Agnes McCormack says they will repeat the wild goose chase in the new year to get the final birds off the ground.
There's 2 lifestyle blocks, and they'll be taken to 1 or 2 of those, and the owner of the lifestyle block will take them on, and they will clip their wings so they won't be able to fly back.
Former Waitemata local board member Rob Thomas helped find new homes for the geese. He says people can be assured they won't become anyone's Christmas lunch.
Obviously, for the privacy of the people who are going to look after the geese, the council hasn't said where they're going, and that's a good call. But also, these geese would not be suitable for that anyway, because they are wild geese. They haven't been reared for food at all. And so, they just wouldn't be suitable for the dinner table.
And so it's a happy ending for the often maligned geese of Western Springs, who will live to see this Christmas and hopefully many more. For Checkpoint, Nita Blakeperson.
And if you need a little lightness in your day, do go online and check out Nita's story. It'll be on our web page and our Facebook page. You can see those gleeful geese piling out of the horse float at that new home. They're too cute. Check it out. Scientists in Denmark say they've managed to obtain the entire genome of a Stone Age woman from a sample of ancient chewing gum. They say the DNA of the hunter-gatherer was remarkably well preserved in the gum, which was derived from the bark of a birch tree. The researchers also found clues as to the hunter-gatherer's health and the contents of a recent meal. The ABC's Barbara Miller reports.
When you heat birch bark, you get birch pitch, a sticky substance widely used in ancient times, primarily for tool making. The trouble is, when it dries, birch pitch turns hard again, so people used to chew it. Partly for practical reasons, partly it's thought for pleasure. Hannes Schröder is an associate professor in evolutionary genomics at the University of Copenhagen.
On the one hand, yes, the thought is that in order to make it malleable again so that you can work it, they used to chew it. But then, because it has these aseptic properties and antibacterial properties, and so people have also suggested that maybe it was chewed to alleviate toothache, or as perhaps a form of early toothbrush or something like that, or just for fun. Often the tooth imprints that are found on these are small tooth imprints, so tooth imprints of children. So it's possible that they chewed on this just as kids chew on chewing gum today.
Hannes Schröder and colleagues have analysed a 5,700-year-old sample of chewed birch pitch found on an excavation site on a Danish island.
Turns out that the DNA in this birch pitch and these chewing gums really incredibly well preserved. And so we used then the DNA fragments out of this pitch to reconstruct an entire human genome. So if you get an ancient genome, you can, do a number of things. It tells a lot of stories.
The story this piece of ancient chewing gum tells is of a woman dubbed Lola, after the island of Lolland where the sample was found. She had dark skin and dark hair, typical of the hunter-gatherers of the time, and blue eyes. They don't know how old Lola was, but they found traces of the Epstein-Barr virus, which is linked to glandular fever and some cancers. And scientists also established she'd recently eaten hazelnuts and duck. Jeremy Austin is the Deputy Director of the Australian Centre for Ancient DNA at Adelaide University.
Yeah, it's a really exciting piece of research because I guess for the last 5 or 10 years, ancient DNA and environmental DNA researchers have been testing more and more unusual sources of DNA. And this is, it's pretty out there in terms of an unusual source. It is really interesting in terms of what else is out there that we could test that humans have touched or put in their mouth that might contain human DNA or DNA from the things that are living on or in their bodies that can tell us about human history.
The research is published today in the journal Nature Communications.
Barbara Miller there. And finally tonight, the Canterbury Police Dog Christmas Party. The puppies and their foster parents, most of them police officers, came into the central station this morning for a day of training and just a little bit of fun. Our reporter Logan Church and videographer Simon Rogers got an invite.
What happens when you have a room full of police puppies, police officers and journalists? Absolute pandemonium. But it's this kind of chaos these dogs and their foster parents love. In Canterbury, there are up to 11 trainee police dogs at any one time. One of them is 11-week-old Roki and her foster parent Will.
She's into everything, eh? She tries to chew everything, bite everything. She's got a lot of energy, so she's a bit of a character.
She'll be the youngest here, wouldn't she?
Definitely, yeah, she's by far, I think. Yeah.
Have you fostered dogs before?
No, this is my first foster dog, so yeah. It's been an interesting experience so far.
Is that something you always wanted to do? Or?
Yep, absolutely, yep. Ever since before I joined the police, this is always something I've wanted to do.
The foster system has been carefully set up by police. Most puppies are placed into the care of officers, many of them young, many interested in one day becoming dog handlers. They look after the dogs at home for up to a year before the police take them back. It must be heartbreaking, secretly, to give them back at the end of it.
I imagine it's going to be pretty tough. Fortunately, I haven't had to go through it yet, so I'm not looking forward to it, but I've heard it's pretty tough to give them back.
One man who has seen it all is Senior Constable Bruce Lamb, handler of 10-and-a-half-year-old Labrador Milo.
Well, he's pretty much retired, except he's still trained to find firearms, whereas he's got a young dog that's his replacement, and he's not quite operational with firearms yet, so we've just kept him for firearms at this stage.
And what's he done over his career?
Oh, he's been pretty phenomenal. He's been national champ. He's had some really, really good cash and huge drug fines, but yeah, so I've got a young dog now, and he's very close to ending.
What sort of training is involved?
For these guys, it's only about 3 months full-time training. We're using the drives they have, the hunt drives and prey drives that we have, and they're all retrieving breeds, so rather than retrieving ducks or animals, we just point that in the direction we want them, and it's teaching them basically to find the drugs. And instead of trying to retrieve it, we just get them to sit. And so it's not a difficult process if the dog's got a good nose on them.
But not all up-and-coming canine officers make the cut. As the human leader of the Canterbury Dog Program, Kerry Gray explains.
That's the beauty of the foster program, is that we can identify early now whether a dog is going to push itself on to be a full-on operational dog. Without the foster program, sometimes we don't find that out until later on. We've done a lot of time and investment in it, so this has helped curtail that a wee bit.
And those puppies are rehomed.
A lot of the dogs get repopulated, so we sell some to the public, and they all get rehomed in and around the country.
After a photo shoot and a time to run around, it's back to work for these pups.
Today is our foster puppy day, that we bring all our puppies into Christchurch Central or the Justice Precinct. It's a chance for our puppies to experience some new environments, new surfaces, floors, rooms, carpets, in and around a lot of people. So it's potentially something they could be operating in.
This Paw Patrol, ready for duty. Almost. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Logan Church.
And Logan and Simon's piece will go on our Facebook page and website as well. Fantastic pictures. Do take a look. Before we go, just some time for some of your feedback here. A number of you have got in touch about this report released today. This was the report into allegations of sexual assault by a member of the New Zealand Labour Party. It found that those claims were unsubstantiated. There was insufficient evidence. Maria Dew QC did that report. A lot of you are saying this is when the complainant should be prosecuted. It is far too easy to cast allegations with no recourse. Another says Paula Bennett needs to apologise for her part in pushing the topic. She got it wrong. Dirty politics. And Vivi has got in touch to say it's typical of National MPs and supporters to project their unethical, deceitful behaviour onto the Labour Party with regard to the unsubstantiated sexual assault claims within the Labour Party. Paula Bennett's moral outrage was never convincing, she says, and simply a deflection from the sordid culture within National. Another person has got in touch to say, after the release of the QC Dew report today, I look forward to the apologies that should be forthcoming from Simon Bridges and Paula Bennett. And Jason from Christchurch says, this is the problem basically with a victim-led approach to such allegations. With two Labour people now out of a job, it is heavily ironic that the Labour-led government led the charge on establishing a victim-led culture in resolving such issues and complaints. William says we are too quick to point a finger of blame and the presumption of innocence doesn't apply. Where sex is concerned, it is easy to allege and hard to prove innocence. I feel for the young man involved, says William. And on a lighter note, on the Goose Roundup at Western Springs, this person says that opportunity lost. Best Christmas dinner in South Otago 60 years ago was roast goose.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A QC has concluded there's not enough evidence to support allegations of sexual assault and harassment against a Labour Party staff member. The government says police will start roadside drug tests from 2021. An investigation into businessman Sir Braley, arrested in Sydney on child pornography charges, was prompted by an anonymous tip-off. And the police say it's likely the bodies of the two people still missing after last Monday's eruption on Volcanic were washed out to sea. The police are scaling down their search over the next few days. Those are the headlines. You're listening to RNZ National. News and weather again at 7 o'clock.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
At the moment, Peter Whittle's pretty much the major one that we can go after because he was the guy in charge.
Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.